Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on this Wednesday, October 4, 2023. It is with pleasure that we are discussing BTC crypto today. We are going to talk about SEC. We are going to talk about movement at the level of the American Parliament, something which is relatively important. We are going to talk about the bearish breakout that we had very strong at the level of the SP 500 and the resilience of BTC in relation to that very important elements. And at the same time, we have endogenous news, all of that. It starts right away. I remind you that we have made available the educational course, which is 60 hours of content grouped through guides and more than 130 videos, in which you have the possibility of training on blockchain, on investment, on trading, on technical analysis. You have a lot of content grouped by functional blocks with quizzes and everything you need, and you have the possibility of having this financed for free thanks to our partner AVATRADE, in which you have all the information. In comments and descriptions, I invite you to go look. We start the news right away with the SEC, which lost its appeal against Ripple. It was refused. It was recorded. So it is very good news. In this case, it is the same judge who really refused the appeal. So on the other hand, it is not a total loss for the SEC because we find ourselves in April 2024 for what could not be decided in the previous trial. So there's not much left, but that still could be a turning point. So we'll have to be careful. In any case, this is good news. It means that there is no longer any risk in any case of appeal in relation to what has been ruled as it stands. So the next stop is going to be April 2024, in which we will have the trial. It will be necessary. We will have the dates. Finally, the date will be in April 2024, and in which we will subsequently have the result. And that could take a few more months. So we are getting closer to July, August, potentially September 2024. So we will have a lot of time unless we have stronger elements arriving. What is important to see is that, yes, we have XRP, which has increased by 5%, which is rather classic. But as we have seen historically, when we have an increase linked to a judgment, which is specific to Ripple only, we will have a bullish acceleration then after an effective retracement. But we are going to discuss it a little more in terms of the graphics. You will see that it is, on the other hand, a sign which is rather strong at the level of BTC, and we will understand why together. First, we come back to the news which is not necessarily good for stocks. After Monday's PMI, we discussed it yesterday. We just had the JOLT report yesterday, which is above forecasts. So this implies that we are in a growth phase. We have an economy which is solid. This is not good for stocks because stocks are currently in a mood which is bad news. Good news is bad news. Okay, we are really in this process. That means that it is positive. That means that it gives ballast to the Fed to continue to increase rates because the Fed is waiting to have an economy that is slowing down, therefore inflation that will decrease. In this case, we see that this is not the case. So in any case, the shares are anticipating a potential increase in rates, or in any case, a longer period of maintaining rates, and therefore something which is pretty bad for stocks. Especially since today we have the PMI 1545, a very important moment, 1545, 16, then 1630. I will tell you about that in a few moments, but overall we are actually expecting these figures to be identical or even lower, so that it's positive. If it's above, that is to say we have an economy that is very strong and therefore behind a complexity of managing inflation. And I think I will cover that in Saturday's video. Another point at the level of the United States, and this is really complicated to manage, we have political instability which is starting to occur. We have already seen this for some time where it is really complicated between Democrats and Republicans. It is becoming more pronounced with the president of the U.S. Senate, which was removed from office. In this case, who is Kevin McCarthy, and he was criticized, mainly in his own camp because he is a Republican, that he was too pro-Democrat with precisely the actions he carried out to avoid the shutdown on Sunday last. So this accentuated the acceleration of his withdrawal, and currently it is who is replacing him. It is our friend Patrick McHenry, who is someone who is mainly pro-crypto and pro-liberal, in which it is he the one who spreads bread regularly. The SEC, and it was he who made the injunction with the SEC to recover the documents, and therefore it is rather positive for crypto, but not necessarily positive for the American economy and for the elections which are coming in 2024. Don't forget that we are in this process, especially since we find ourselves with an increase in the bond market in which we have stocks that are collapsing. We are going to discuss it. We are having the discussion of an analyst that I really like elsewhere, which is Edward, in which he explains that we still have traces of what happened in 1987, although it is totally different, but that we have this recession which should arrive, but which does not happen. And next to it, we have a bond crisis, which is sinking stocks. So we have a sector rotation, which is taking place with a modification of liquidity. And so on. This we have our friends JP Morgan, who explains to us that the bond yield is setting stocks on fire, which is completely classic. And it's something that we had already anticipated about 3 weeks, 1 month, or 10 years ago, that this was the case and that it was going to happen whatever happened, and that therefore we was going to have a break here on the SPF 500. Bearish. The week continues in the tone of the beginning of the week, where we see that we really continue to sink. When we look at the daily, we see that we did 1.5 again, I think yesterday, 1.75, perhaps opening to closing, 1.45, 1.45. The candle must make 1.75, and so we made 1.45 of bodies. So that means that we have very strong bearish pressure. So we are still far from the 4-5% that we have already known historically, but we have good pressure. We are in the process of to break the 1, we are heading towards the 1.1, classically, in which we made a touch today, and we are in the process of retracing. My low target still remains 1.608. You just have to be patient as usual. My rotais, I'm going to leave it there, even though it lost its meaning with the bearish breakup that we had there. I think we could have another rotais that would be here in the 4.255, so I'm still going to leave this one. And I position the next one, which could be found here, in which we could have a very nice retest before having a bearish continuity. Therefore, a strengthening of the position that we have. So I'm going to make a quick aside on what is happening in terms of oil. And there we have a clear attack that is being made, and it is very politicized. And really, the closer we get in terms of 2024, plus it will be politicized. So it will be very complicated. In particular, we have attacks on the Biden camp, therefore on the administration, which is in progress, on the fact of diluting oil stocks. That's what I'm telling you. It's going to be really important. Here to monitor crude oil stocks, because we have an attack saying that we are going down to critical levels to be able to lower the price, because we are preparing an electoral campaign of its own camp. Clearly, there is an attack of politicization on the price of oil, and we know very well that historically the price of oil and the elections are something that is really very important in the USA. So we're going to pay attention to that. It would imply that we could have, as expected, a continuation of the retracement of oil in the $83. Which would at the same time be consistent if we ever had an economy that consumed less oil, which is not yet the case, and which is even relatively far away. A quick point on the rate differential at the level of the bonds, it clearly shows that the 10-year rate is being valued. This is not what we perhaps expected at a given moment. It was perhaps those of the 2-year-olds which are decreasing, and not necessarily those of the 10-year-olds which are increasing. Well, in this case, it is the 2 years are not moving, but the 10 years are in the process of rising and catching up with the delay they have. So here we are really in this process. So we are taking a step back once again. Above all, that do not forget, here we are going to talk about BTC, but don't forget that we resumed in October. It is the return, and that implies that we are arriving at the last quarter, which makes the results, which makes the prices at the level of the traders. So these are moments in which we are going to have an increase in volume, an increase in volatility, an increase in manipulation, because funds must produce their returns and institutional traders must at some point have their bonuses. So this implies that we will have to ensure this end of the year, generally it is October, November, and then we have the students who are in December to precisely take profit, manage the arbitrages to precisely validate their profits behind. So it's always something that is short term in this type of institution because that's what we ask of them. And so it also influences a return of volatility, which is rather positive, but also a return of manipulation, which is relatively important. So we will be careful. BTC level, we are still here in this high ranging zone. Overall, when we take a step back, we see very clearly that we have our high and low block in which we are oscillating between the two. Well, in this case, there is not much that is being put in place more than that. If we look at the short term, we have some nice things in which, in fact, we made our little rebound, we broke, and we are in the process of retesting inside. So what's interesting to see is two things. It is that, one, I will come back to here. It is not because we want to see a bullish acceleration that it is a bullish acceleration. It is not because we desire to witness a bearish acceleration that it automatically translates into a bearish acceleration. It is crucial to truly distance ourselves from this notion. Personally, I have a type of retest for the continuation of bearish trends. I possess significant liquidity calls that are essential in the context of a long squeeze. Therefore, the overall coherence of the situation remains intact. Additionally, upon closer examination, when we redirect our focus to daily and delve into the realm of Ichimoku, what do we observe? We go to weekly, we go to Ishimoku, and you will see that we are in a phase of rejection here of the Kumo. So potentially we will go and retest the lower part to make a rupture of the Kumo afterwards, head towards crossovers generally being a weakening at the level of Ishimoku to be able to move up or down. In this case, that would be more or less what we are going to do. So we also have coherence here at the level of reflection. So there we are in this process. You just have to be careful because there is a return to manipulation. Take into account that here we are in the process of maintaining our position while we have some rather positive news regarding Grayscale. Grayscale was it? Big candle that we saw. So we take a little step back. It's not something that we have here. We see that we have maintained ourselves. So yes, on the other hand, it is positive. We have maintained ourselves, even though we has an SP 500, which has wallowed. So that confirms the correlation, rather the decorrelation of BTC in relation to classic assets, therefore, which is rather positive, but even the endogenous elements which are specific cannot make things move the price on the rise. It can maintain. I think that if we hadn't had that, we would certainly have gone much deeper. We would have gone to retest here, at least this area, the 26,600. In this case, it's not the case. So for me, I plus this retest phase. I'm going to wait to see if we really have an acceleration here from the SP 500 downwards. I think that we will perhaps have the final movement to finish liquidating the long ones here and then structure ourselves. And I remind you once again, don't tell me that I'm someone who is struggling. I'm mostly long-term, and I actually consider that the resilience we have is rather positive. All right? Because if we hadn't had this resilience at the BTC level, we would already be potentially retesting the 23,000. All right? So here we are more in something which is really very strong, which manages to hold, in which we have a course which is rather structured and which is relatively simple to read at the moment because we are in a form of range in which we have the classic retests and the effective movements. So we are currently in the process of reintegrating a range. We will have to see if it is a false reintegration or not. That will be validated by the break of 27,172. What will happen? We have to validate, in which we will then retest the middle of the range globally before retesting either the upper part or the lower part and then restructuring. In any case, BTC is holding up. Altcoins are still relatively in the red, but although we have this news at the level of the SEC, which is rather positive, normally on altcoins, this is what is targeted by the securities, we see that it has kept us in flow, but it only remains kept in flow. We cannot break. When we look at the order flow, we see that we are still flat. There is no one taking positions because currently we are in a range policy. We have no flow, an equal range policy. It's simple. We buy the lower terminals, we sell the upper terminals here. So we buy here, we sell here when we arrive here, and when we are in the integration, what do? We sell because in this case, we are in this upper limit here of Ranger. This is the new limit that we have set. At least the real limit still remains the 26,800. But in occurrence, we will see if we manage to get 28,800. Break, reintegrate below, and break bearish. There we would have a nice bearish continuity that we have had in mind for a very long time already. We are patient. You have to remain patient. And I will end by reminding you to always take a step back, because when we have accelerating price movements like that, we will also have a craze which will take place on the CT, therefore on crypto Twitter, or on a little bit of everything which is dragging, and therefore you have to take a lot of distance. Not because it's necessarily bearish, not at all. It's just that when we have an acceleration, a big movement after a lateralization movement, we necessarily have a euphoria that arrives, whether it is downward or upward, whether it is through euphoria on the increase, therefore rather joy, and fear on the decrease. But therefore, we must always take a step back from that. Have we left the range? We zoom out. Range up, range down. Well, we're just here retesting the upper part of the range to see, are we going to re-enter here? We got rejected. So we're re-entering the lower range. So we're in something that is rather classic, and therefore there is no reason to worry. I hope you liked this video. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy. I hope you also saw yesterday's video on BNB, Binance's crypto, in which we still have a rather special setup where we will have a big buying opportunity shortly. And we meet at 13:30 to talk about Atom, Cosmos's crypto.